having a disability was like an added layer, right? And I found it very difficult because everyone would question, why am I so small? Why am I this? Why am I that?
Hello and welcome to the Disability Download, brought to you by Pan Disability charity Leonard, Cheshire. On this podcast, we respond to current topics, share stories and open up conversations about disability. My name's Beth and I'm one of your co-hosts for today's episode. With it being Black History Month, we've decided to focus today's episode on the intersectionality of being Black and disabled. Myself and co-host Peter have talked to some pretty interesting people such as celebrity Fats Timbo on being Black, disabled and in the limelight. We've also spoke to academic and advocate Cassie Lovelock, where we shed some light on the harrowing experiences of those who have been victims of hate crimes. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Disability Download.
Our guest today is none other than the fabulous Fats Timbo, a name that resonates across the realms of social media, fashion and television. Fats is not just a social media influencer, she's a trailblazer in the world of disability advocacy. You may recognise her from the covers of Vogue, breaking barriers and redefining beauty standards in the fashion industry. Fats Timbo has also graced our screens as a star on Channel 4's Undateables, where she effortlessly challenges societal norms and misconceptions about love, relationships and disability. Today, myself and my co-host Beth had the privilege of delving into Fats Timbo's incredible journey, exploring her experiences as a disability advocate, her passion for reshaping perceptions, and her relentless commitment to promoting inclusivity and diversity. So without further ado, let's dive into this captivating conversation with the one and only Fats Timbo, right here on Disability Download.
So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
It.
You've had a really sort of busy period, like a really sort of busy year. You've been on like Vogue, yes. You've been on TV, you're quite a star. What was it like waking up having millions of followers on social media?
Oh, it was a lot, to be honest with you. It was a bit daunting, but at the same time, it wasn't real because it didn't feel real because it was during the pandemic. So at the time, it just felt like numbers. It felt like, oh, I've got this many numbers of likes, I've got this many. I never accounted it to actual people, and it sounds funny to say, but when you're just filming things on your phone and uploading it, it just feels like you're posting for the social media, but you don't realize that it's for a whole nation that are sitting looking on their phones. When the whole country reopened, and I was going out more, that's when people started to recognize me. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is actually real. This is insane. I think it kind of hit me then when people actually came up to me and started recognizing me.
Has your life sort of changed since?
It has completely. It's done a whole 180. Nobody knew me before. Now people know me. And it's insane. I go on the underground and I get at least 5 people recognizing me or wanting to take a picture with me. So I've always got to be photo ready all the time. It's exhausting, but it's got to be done.
So you do lots of really funny comedic material. What would you say inspires you?
What inspires me is everyday life a lot of the time, and also trending things that are going on. And then I put my own twist on it through my own experiences. So, for example, when this lady came up to me after I did my lashes, I was going home and she was like, out of nowhere, she just popped out of nowhere and she was like, you born like that? And I was thinking, I don't even know what to say. I was like, yeah. And then she was like, your mum born like that? And I was like, yeah. And then she was like, okay, have a good life. So I reenacted that. In like that situation, and a lot of people laughed, like they found it so funny because it was like, this is an actual human being doing this to you. So I said, this is a true story, this is exactly what happened. So I kind of base it off real life things, and I kind of get inspired by, for example, one of my friends, we went to a party and she left early because there was no food. And one of my latest viral videos, I basically stated that I'm leaving because there's no food at this function. So I kind of I just get inspired by real life, real funny things and relatable stuff as well that people think, oh, I do that as well.
I think that's what makes you so popular though, because your content is super relatable and it really resonates with a lot of people. Anyway, let's talk about Vogue. So this is such a big deal. For listeners, Fats appeared in British Vogue in May 2023, looking absolutely amazing. Fats, can you tell us about how this all came about?
So I got approached by Sinead Burke, and honestly, it was actually such a pleasure that she actually even approached me. And when she did, honestly, I felt like I was about to collapse because I was like, me doing Vogue. I used to say that when I first started modeling. I was like, maybe one day I'll be in Vogue as a joke. But at the same time, I was like, maybe one day, who knows? Like, I didn't think it would actually happen. And yeah, I said yes, of course, when she emailed me. And we just got the ball rolling to doing it. I was with how many other people was doing it with me? I think about 19 change makers. And honestly, it was just such a pleasure to be amongst all these amazing people that have done so many amazing things that have disabilities. I honestly, I feel like stuff like that needs to be normal. You know, it should be a regular thing. And I'm glad folk took that step to actually doing that. You know, it was just sensational, to be honest with you. And I'll always remember it for the rest of my life. First time being on Vogue.
Sounds amazing. I've really got to ask the question though, and I guess this is the one that everybody probably wants to know. Did you get to keep the dress?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
I did. And I wore it
amazing.
again as well. Honestly, it was bespoke as well. So it wouldn't make sense if I couldn't keep the clothes because
Yeah,
it's made for me. So it
amazing.
was good.
How did your family and friends react?
All my days, they were so proud. They were so proud of me. My family was so happy to see that I was pursuing my dreams. Because I always said to my mum, one day I want to do Vogue. And um, now that she's seen her little girl do it, it's like, wow, you know, I did a video on my stories, like of my mum's blind reaction. And she was just like, Fatima, oh my God, you're in Vogue. And I was like, yeah, yes, I did it. I did it. And my friends just, yeah, they were so elated for me.
I remember seeing that cover, and I was like, you know, but bad for our listeners. Good. Yeah, it was a really
Yes,
good cover, a really
I
good
know
cover.
what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Thank you.
But
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so proud of it.
yeah, no, it was an
I love
incredible
it.
achievement. I think
Thank
sort of
you.
leading on to that question was about you were on Channel 4's Undateables. I got to watch a bit of it. You were quite good in it, but I never really.
Oh, thank you.
What I wanted to ask was, what was your experience like on the show?
My experience on the show, initially, to be honest with you, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to be labeled as undateable. I know full well I'm very dateable. But I thought about the bigger picture and I thought about sharing my story. That's the main thing about it. It's about sharing my story. It's about inspiring others. It's about representation. So that's why I did it. And then when I actually did do the show, they set me up with an average height person and it didn't work out well. It didn't work out with him. It's not like, you know, it's just one of those things. It just didn't work out. But they were absolutely amazing, the production. Even when you talk to like a psychologist to see if you're like mentally ready to do the show, they were amazing. And yeah, I just loved doing it. I went on this morning afterwards. It was like my first ever TV experience. So I'm glad I did it and I'm glad it's part of my story because I've started on the Undateables and you know, this year I'm doing Vogue. Yeah, it's just I wanted to have some sort of place where I start my TV debut and I'm glad I did it on the Undateables.
When we last spoke, we talked about disability in Africa, and it's a big talking point where there's lots of different misconceptions, and it's almost a taboo where disabilities isn't really spoken about in the household. Um, you mentioned possibly doing some work around this, such as doing a documentary. Could you tell us a bit more?
I want to do that because when I did go to Africa, their attitude to disability is completely different. And I thought, wow, I'm so lucky to be brought up in the UK because we have benefits for disabled people. We have so much support as well, and it's not as stigmatized as it is in Africa. So that's why I think if I show the world and the Western world what it's like to have a disability in Africa, I think people will be more aware. I think people would want to maybe raise money for people with disabilities in Africa because they're really struggling, and I feel so bad sometimes thinking about it. Like in my country, they had a civil war in the 90s where they were cutting off people's legs, cutting off people's arms, and it's left people really severely disabled. And there's some people who just walk on their hands because they don't have a wheelchair. Wheelchairs are so expensive, and it's not even just Sierra Leone. It's third world countries. It's completely overlooked, and it should be there should be more awareness to it because yeah, there is, and there's still work to be done, but it's way better than most places.
It's really interesting. What would you say some of the attitudes to disability are like in parts of Africa?
They think it's witchcraft. They think it's like black magic, or they think you're like cursed, or they think you're like a witch or something. They don't think that it's actual like medical problems. They think it's like they think you're cursed basically. So they try to disassociate themselves away from people with disabilities, and it's not nice. And sometimes you are in traffic and you see like a little boy with his grandma who's blind begging, because they have no source of income. It's so sad, but yeah, it's completely different there, and it's really, really suffering.
Have you got any other exciting projects lined up for the future? Could we see you on the big screen anytime soon?
Possibly, possibly. Well, not possibly. Yes, you will. I can't say exactly what it is, but just know you'll see me soon on television, and it's for something good.
Holding the cards close to your chest there. I guess we're not going to find out.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I'm holding them.
Oh no, it sounds really exciting. It sounds really exciting. Can't wait to see you on the big screen or see you on TV. We'll definitely keep an eye out.
Definitely do, because it's going to be good.
I've got a question about sort of identity. What's it like being a Black woman with a disability? How do you challenge the stereotype?
To be honest with you, I feel like my disability has been more of the challenge than being Black because I grew up in Newham where basically everyone is a minority, no one stands out because everyone's different. So it kind of helps with knowing that, okay, I'm Black and that's fine. But having a disability was like an added layer, right? And I found it very difficult because everyone would question, why am I so small? Why am I this? Why am I that? It was difficult to deal with because it was like, I can relate to everyone, but obviously I can relate to people who are Black, but I couldn't relate to people in terms of my disability. So there was this disconnect that I had from everyone, really, because I'm the only one that is the only little person that's around, obviously having parents that are average height and then having all my siblings that are average height, you just feel alone most of the time. So I would say my disability is what made me the most lonely.
I grew up in Newham as well, so I can sort of resonate with it being a bit of a melting pot, but then at the same time, disabilities isn't necessarily something that is discussed, or you don't really get to see visible disabilities or any kind of disabilities in Newham. So I can totally resonate with that. when I first met you, we were talking about sort of social media, and you doing a really good talk, and you spoke about social media and sort of social media bullying and trolls. Do you ever experience it, and if so, like how do you deal with it?
I experience it like every day, to be honest with you. And how I deal with it is knowing the facts that I've made it this far through physical, mental, verbal bullying. I can deal with cyberbullying as well. That's what I think to myself. I'm like, okay, I can deal with the cyberbullying if I just push through and, just because Tom said, oh, I'm not worthy enough to be on social media or I can't dance, when I know full well I can dance. I'm not going to listen to Tom. I'm going to keep going and pursuing my dreams. So that's the kind of attitude that I have. And then also having social media tools that protect you from seeing negative comments kind of help as well. So there's keywords that you can block from seeing on your actual social media. So now I pretty much don't see any hate at all compared to the first, I don't even know, maybe 3, 4 years. That's kind of how I deal with it. And when I do see it, I don't look at the full sentence. I just block and delete and keep moving.
I think that's really good because you always hear people say, don't you, like you can get like 1,000 positive comments, and then a lot of people, that one negative comment can just be like the one that they'll fixate on. So I think it's really good that you've
Yes.
kind of like set your wards in place, and yeah, you don't even entertain it because what's the point? What
What
is
is
the
the point? What is the point? I
yeah.
don't need to listen to Sally, whoever, who's hasn't even got a picture and is just cussing everyone. No, they're the sad
Yeah,
ones, not me.
I always think it just says more about them anyway than it does about anything
Exactly.
else. It's like it's projection. That's what it is. It's
It
complete
really
projection.
is. It's projection, and I can't afford to listen to that at all. If I know in like the attitude I have, I'm like, I know if I listen to that, I can't go far in life.
Time is precious. That's what I always say. So
Yeah.
moving on to Black History Month, is this something that you kind of celebrate? Like, what does it mean to you?
Black History Month, to be honest with you, I feel like it's where we celebrate Black celebrities, not even just Black celebrities, Black change makers like Martin Luther King. And that's where I actually learn like Black history because obviously growing up in the UK, you learn about the national curriculum, the typical stuff. And I think Black History Month is where we actually get the time to learn about what has happened in Black history, the slavery and things like that. So to be honest with you, that's the only time I've actually had to learn my own culture and history. And I think it's very essential for everyone to learn about it because, you know, some history is just erased, some history that we haven't even learned about that's really important for our knowledge and for our future. I love it, to be honest with you. It's good.
Amazing. So obviously you're like a really good kind of advocate for disability rights. Do you think like there's a space at the moment for disabled people in media, arts, and fashion? And what do you think needs to change so that there's a better representation?
There's still yet for more disabled people to be entered in those spaces. But because there is more of us doing that, it's better. So, for example, fashion, we still need more adaptive wear. There's still a space for disabled people to get clothes. And for me, I want to get petite clothing and I don't want to have to think about tailoring. It's long. It's absolutely long. And also fashion shows. We're more in fashion shows now. I absolutely love it because it's more diverse. It's not the same typical people you see, and we're being seen more. 1 in 4 people are disabled, and it's still not accounted for in the media. So day by day, as we're getting more representation, we can see ourselves in the traditional forms of media, and that's what I want to see for the future.
there needs to be sort of that more representation of people with disabilities in all sort of areas of society, whether that's media, whether that's in government or within politics. And we've got a bit of a way to go, but I do think that there is, there are some changes that are sort of being made, but we just need, I think, people like you, Fats, to continue to sort of advocate.
Yes, definitely. I'll continue to speak up, and I'll continue to make sure that I'm in those spaces that need disabled people and voices as well. So it's so important.
Given your experience, you've done Vogue, you've been on television, you're a comedian, social media influencer, and you've also experienced, discrimination with your disability, and that you've had to sort of really sort of figure out your identity and all of what you've been saying. What advice would you give a younger you? That's quite a sort of a really deep philosophical question, but what advice would you give to a younger you?
Advice I'll give to my younger self is to speak up more, because when I was younger, I didn't speak up as much because I was scared of hurting people's feelings. I was scared of not being liked. And now I realize when you're more of yourself and you're not scared of like consequences in terms of speaking up for what's right, you're doing what's right for people, and that's what makes you liked. That's what makes you liked more. Now I don't care if somebody doesn't like me, that's your own problem. But before it was such a terrifying thing. But yeah, now I'm just that's what I'd advise myself. I think I'll just say, just stop caring as much. Do what makes you feel good. Do what's right. Don't let anyone walk all over you, because I was letting people walk all over me because they knew I was scared of just not being liked,
Fats, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed. We've learned so much. You're a real delight to speak to, and a real influencer to people that want to sort of make change or and I think you really send a really positive message to people that want to make change or want to be a social media influencer, or just generally just want to sort of make change. So I just really want to thank you for that. You're a real inspiration.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And this is why I do it, because I want to inspire the young people, and I just want to be that change maker that I wish I had growing up.
Well, you're definitely doing that.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
After our interview with Timbo, I went to central London and asked the public their thoughts on Black History Month, disability hate crime, and the cost of living crisis and its effects on disabled people. Here's what the people had to say.
I think there should be a lot more in this country for support and things that people need. I don't see enough disability ramps or enough care dogs or anything like that really. Even up to crossing the road, there's a thing for crossing the road, you can feel under for blind people to cross, but it's not very talked about and not very people know about it. So I think there just needs to be more awareness of helping people with disabilities and of disabilities themselves.
That's good, thank you. And in terms of the cost of living, because lots of people are impacted by the cost of living, how do you think people with disabilities are impacted by the cost of living?
I reckon they're probably impacted a lot more, because I know that disabilities tend to have a lot more costs that come with them because of all the care that you need. So I'd say, people with disabilities are being a lot more affected by the cost of living crisis.
What does Black History mean to you?
So currently I'm still trying to understand what Black history could mean. So for me, I just have to do more research, but generally in England and probably Western countries, it's a time where they more so celebrate historical figures, but I do feel like there needs to be, it's the life you live being a Black person isn't predicated, maybe that's the word, to 1 month. So Black History Month's an interesting one, because it's that's the time when people will call and ask questions or try to reach out and raise the profile of Black history, but it's a lifelong experience.
And then in terms of people who have got disabilities and that are Black, what do you think their experiences are like?
So in relation to disability and blackness, it's the intersection of those two components, and I'll add women to it. But I was writing like a master's thesis about that, where it's just like being in that intersection can be extremely challenging when it's not being able to get the correct or right support, and all of these invisible barriers that other people cannot see or could never fathom or understand. So that's one thing in terms of the intersection of like disability and blackness. But thank goodness there's more, well, there should be more schemes out there to help people. It's just not, I'm obviously talking from my personal experience actually, but it's not the most easiest thing to navigate, because discussions of racial barriers, you have to kind of navigate certain rooms you may not be in or won't know culturally how to navigate through. And then with disabilities, getting into those rooms can be challenging because you need the support to get there or to stay there. But also I feel like there's a unique perspective to it, because it's you get people to think a different way from your experience.
Our next guest is Cassie Lovelock from King's College, University of London. Cassie is an advocate for disability rights and has published work on mental health services and disability, and will be sharing her insights and experiences on hate crime in relation to disabled people. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed and just to share your insights on hate crime. But I guess the first question is that hate crime continues to be an ongoing issue in the UK. And I just wanted to get your views on why you think that is.
Cost of living? Obviously, we're all feeling the cost of living squeeze, whatever the diplomatic term for it is. But like in the end, when people aren't seeing their needs met and disabled people are perceived to have our needs met for free, of course, it's going to brew that sense of resentment, because people can't pay their bills. They're stuck on universal credit. They can't run the car. They can't feed their children. And then disabled people are perceived as being given all of those things, right? We're given Motability cars. We're given benefits to be able to afford to feed ourselves. And even though that's not true, that's the perception. So of course, it's going to breed that sense of resentment, isn't it? Because they can't do any of those things and we're perceived to have all of those things. And why are we being provided for? And I think that stems into the same conversation about sort of asylum seekers and people trying to stop the boats and all of those things, is that like, we're not helping our own. We're not helping our own. Why are we helping all of these other people when it's that same thing? For me, anyway, I think a lot of it's that. Some of it is probably like disabled people are quite like easy to be made victims. And like, there's definitely a more diplomatic way of putting that, but it's that sense of like capitalism and sort of all of these things position disabled people, and like our history as disabled people in terms of like asylums and ugly laws and not being allowed in public really positions us as being the bottom of society. So then for an able-bodied person, when their life is going to shit, they're having a really, really tough time, they're gonna look for a group of people to look at to make themselves feel better. And in the end, that ends up being disabled people because of how we're positioned. We're positioned to be easy to victimize. And like, for me, I think a great example of that is that I go to the supermarket in my wheelchair and I'll be buying things and someone will like, I'll put my stuff on the thing and all of that. And they'll be like, oh God, it must be so difficult. And I'm like, well, I live with my partner in a very nice flat and I have a very well-paying job and I'm really lucky to have all of those things, but you've seen my wheelchair and decided my life must be horrific. I think that's the sort of thing that sums it up in that instance. And then I think the last thing for me is like social media. It gives people the anonymity to say whatever they want, doesn't it? Say whatever they want behind a screen and not even be aware that it'll actually have an impact on the people that they're saying it to, because they'll say it and forget it.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the Wild West, isn't it, in terms of sort of social media and, you know, the idea that you can sort of hide behind the screen and say, and I think it's increasing, isn't it? You know, and I don't know whether there's accountability, which is an issue. One of the things I was thinking about when you were talking was around, there was a recent sort of news article that had come out recently, which basically spoke about people with disability sort of being a hindrance on the economy. You know, it costs a lot to support people with disabilities. And just a question, do you think the sort of that rhetoric sort of fuels, you know, hate crime, as it will?
Yeah, I think it always has. Like, I think there's been definitely an increase in it, but I'm not sure as a rhetoric it ever really went away, did it? Like, I remember at like the 2008 recession and the Sun had their like hotline of like, oh, is your neighbor faking disability? Give us a call and we'll investigate, kind of thing. Like, I don't think it ever really went away as a rhetoric. It's just like now back in full force again because there's a recession, and again because disabled people, and for me, they're an easy scapegoat for other people. Like when people reflect on bigotry and all of those things, ableism is the glue that holds all of them together, because people can claim to be anti-racist and love is love and all of those things, but if they're still being ableist, they're still being all of those things as well. It's just about separating themselves from the the least bad parts of bigotry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. No, thank you for that. Thanks for that insight. There's another question that came to mind, which was around, could you recall the earliest time when you experienced hate crime?
In some ways, no, I can't, because it was baked into what growing up was like, right?
Yeah.
But in other ways, you can think of specific examples of things people said and the way they chased you around, and particularly hate speech in that sense of what people feel entitled to call you and how they feel entitled to treat you. And I think there's a lot of things like that. But for me, because I grew up in that environment, I never really considered any of them hate. It was very much, for me, positioned as like, that is the price you pay for being here. That's the price you pay for growing up here. That's the price you pay for the education that we're giving you and the outcomes and things you're going to gain from growing up in this country, in this area of this country, with this likelihood of attending this top university kind of thing. It was never conceptualized or positioned as, that is wrong. It wasn't that. It was just, that is the price that you pay. So for me, experiencing hate crimes, it wasn't until my disability. I was born with a genetic disability, but it didn't really make itself known until I was in my 20s. It wasn't until that happened, until people treated me differently because of my disability, that I conceptualize any of those things as hate crime. Both yes and no.
Especially with when you're talking about hate crime and there's like a bit of a racial component, that's also part of it. It can sometimes seem like the norm, if that makes sense, depending on the kind of era that you lived in. So yeah, I can totally resonate with that point. So I think in essence it touches upon something else, which is around intersectionality and race. And for you being sort of a mixed race Black, woman with a disability, do you think there's, I guess, like an extra layer? Do you think your experience with hate crime is different from, your white counterparts?
I mean, it must be, right? I'm not white, so I don't know how they experience it. But like, I think there definitely is. Like, there's a lot of forced reflection about like, what was it about me which motivated them to treat me like that? If that is a good way of putting it. Like, it's that thing of like, my disability and my race grant people permission to treat me in a specific way. And then when you are mixed raced, and this is different from being Black or being white, your race is chosen by the audience you step into. I can step into places and those people will decide if I am white. I will step into places and they'll decide that I am Black. And in reality, I have no say over that. It's about what that audience perceives of me, right? I work in academia. You can guess which direction it goes. But like, it's exactly that thing that depending on what that audience decides depends on my value, which then, when it comes to hate crime, places you in this limbo of being like, have they said these things about me because of my skin color? Have they said these things about me because of my bone structure and my features and how my hair presents itself? Or have they said these things about me because of my disability? And in reality, of course, it's a mixture of both. It's never that easy and that easy to separate, but in experiencing these things and trying to process them and taking them to therapy, you do go through this thinking process about like, what is it about me which equips those people to treat me like this? And I think it's that sense of disability is something that is seen overall into society as more disqualifying than race. And that means for me, I tend to go away from things and be like, they treated me that way because of my disability. But in reality, it was probably both. It's very easy and nice, and there's such a desire to separate the two and think that people aren't full of hate because of my skin color, it's because of my disability, or vice versa. But in the end, it's just both of them, because how can it not be?
My experience is slightly different because it's much more easier for me to identify what and why is it being said, because I'm, as a Black male, I would experience, I guess, like sort of almost like one element of racism, but you have to sort of it's almost like you have to sort of filter through what messages are coming through. So it must be a lot more, it must be quite difficult and quite stressful.
Yeah, I think like especially hate speech is the easiest way to identify it, because people can call you a cripple or people can call you a hard R cripple, and then you know the difference, don't you? Sort of thing. I think when it's more sort of insidious and like a little bit more subtle, not that hate crime's ever really subtle, but it kind of can be in its own unique way. In the end, you find yourself questioning these things, because like when you have been a victim of a hate crime, even though rationally, you know, it's not on you, of course you blame you. Like, oh, what should I have done differently? Oh, what should I? But in the end, particularly around racial hate crime and around disability hate crime, there's nothing you can do differently, because for me, how I present myself is obvious. I am a black mixed race disabled person. I can't hide either of those things, sort of thing. But you do end up questioning yourself and being like, should I have acted differently? Should I have said something differently? But in the end, hate is hate. It's not on you that people feel able to treat you that way. It's on the structures that we've gained and how ableism and racism are baked into the society we have.
And I think there needs to be there needs to be more discussions had. So I often think of René Lodge's book, which I'm sure you've read, which I don't know whether touches on disability. You know, it's obviously about race, but again, I think there needs to be more discussions around the intersectionality, especially around disability and race, which I think those discussions, and there just needs to be more of those discussions, in my opinion. But it makes me think about, just talking about social media, it made me think about the George Floyd movement, which was like really pushed through social media and all these other different avenues, you know, with the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, which exposed systemic oppression both in North America and in Europe. It just made me think about the question around, do you think that movement sort of developed like a momentum for people with disabilities, as people, the intersectionality, so people that had disabilities and who were also Black? Do you think there was sort of a movement there? Do you think the BLM movement sort of helped to highlight hate crime incidences amongst people with disabilities and Black people? Sorry, it's a very long question.
Like yes and no, sort of two-part answer. I think individually there were a lot of cases of them pointing out that this person who died by police violence was also disabled, and we cannot discount that part of their lives. I think social media did a good job in adding all of the hashtags like Black Disabled Lives Matter and all of those things. But on the flip side of it, I think there was definitely a hesitancy sort of around the idea that if we start talking about Black disabled lives, we're taking away from Black lives. And I think that's always been an issue when trying to discuss intersectionality and understand intersectionality, is there's this idea that bringing in an intersection takes away from the main group. When in reality, it shouldn't. It should just be that. It should just be an addition. How I see it, it doesn't seem to really work like that often that well, particularly when really big movements like BLM are trying to show people that aren't politically and social justice minded and engaged that this is important. Then when we bring in a complexity, people tend to just sort of switch off, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of it is this idea that, like, for me, ableism is the like the bigotry which glues all the bigotries together, where like you can say Black Lives Matter, but if you're ableist, then you're not saying Black Lives Matter, because you've decided Black disabled lives matter. Don't. Only those good, able-bodied, economically contributing and valuable Black lives are the ones that matter. And I think that stems into all of them. Like, you can say love is love, and great, but if you don't care about disabled people, then every disabled LGBTQ person that you are saying love is love isn't true. And I think the love is love example is another prime one, where disabled people can't get married. We're here saying love is love and marriage equality exists, but disabled people can't get married, because then we lose all of our state support and we lose all of those things. And I don't think a lot of people know that, but also it's that idea that, yes, George Floyd and the BLM movement and like his harrowing death and the death of Breonna Taylor and all of these things were horrific, and I never want to take away from those things. And people, particularly in the States, are dying for literally no reason because of institutional racism. But a lot of those people were disabled and are disabled. And a lot of people in this country who are victims of police violence, I work in mental health, right? I'm a mental health academic. I can tell you through and through that racial violence in this country and racial violence from the police for disabled people and mentally ill people is ongoing and perpetually going and has not changed. It hasn't. Yes, we had 2020 and the media and white people suddenly realizing, oh my God, racism still exists. What do we do? Posting black squares on Instagram. But what did the black squares do for Black lives? Nothing.
It's been lovely speaking to you, and you've shared some really great sort of insights and experiences. So thanks ever so much.
Thank you. It's been great.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Disability Download. We just want to say a huge thank you to our amazing guests, Fats and Cassie, for coming on and sharing their stories and knowledge. You can find both of our guests' social profiles in the show notes. We'd also like to say a big thanks to members of the public that shared their voice too. We'd love to know what you think, so get in touch by emailing us at disabilitydownload@leonardcheshire.org, or you can contact us on Twitter or Instagram @leonardcheshire. If there's a guest you'd like to hear, reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Disability Download.